Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. I'm standing under the bridge that goes across the Severn here at Upton-upon-Severn in Worcestershire. Back on the Severn Way, that behind me of course is Sabrina. This is where we left off last time. Today's journey is only one of just under 7 miles down to the Gloucestershire town of Tewkesbury. So we'll be leaving Worcestershire today as we just before we enter Tewkesbury at Mythe Bridge, where we retrace our steps back across the river again. Before we set off on our journey though, what I'll do is tell you a little bit more about the town here of Upton-upon-Severn. I'm currently sat on the Upton Blues Festival seat. Each year, Upton-upon-Severn has a famous blues festival with bands from all across the West Country and further afield up into the Midlands as well, come here to play for a few days, usually over a weekend and a couple of days either side of that, and they camp in what is the floodplain on the opposite bank of the River Severn here. Great atmosphere. They also run a couple of other music festivals throughout the year as well. I think one of them is a jazz festival. So yeah, there's lots of things that bring people in to this wonderful town here of Upton-upon-Severn in Worcestershire. Upton-upon-Severn was founded back in 897. In the 13th century, the nearby Bishop of Hereford, Hereford's about 20 miles from Upton-upon-Severn, just over the border, Herefordshire of course, he had his wine brought along the River Severn, and because of the Severn here, it became a port. Things like grain and stone were brought here to serve the community hereabouts and the local villages. So it's always been an important place, a crossing place too. The bridge that I'm currently standing underneath was built in 1940 to replace an earlier one. And I said previously, it's the only bridge between Worcester, a few miles north of here, and Gloucester, or Tewkesbury should I say, is the next bridge which will be coming to. There is one intermediate bridge which was built in the 1950s, and I'll tell you about that when we get to it. When we leave the town here, we'll be heading down to a place called Upper Ham, which is now a nature reserve. It's a triple SI as well. And according to my notes, there are several places on Upper Ham which have got military connections. I think there was a rifle range built there in the 1870s, and the Home Guard went on to use that same rifle range back in the early part of the Second World War for practice. Oh, in case you're wondering, the word ham is a West Country word used in Worcestershire and south here, right down to Cornwall. And it means a flat strip of land next to a river. And usually they're not built on because of the aforementioned flooding reasons. The other thing that Upton-upon-Severn is famous for historically is Oliver Cromwell. In fact, there's a plaque just on the other side of this bridge near the Tudor Tea Rooms and Museum. And it was because Oliver Cromwell used Upton to cross the River Severn. It was always been a major crossing point before he started the battle of Worcester, which I mentioned way back in, when was it, 17A, so we're on 19 today, when I covered Worcester there on the Severn Way, the Battle of Worcester. We won't go into that again now, but yeah, this is the crossing point he used. Hereabouts, obviously not this particular bridge, because this was 1940, but hereabouts he crossed and all of his armies amassed here before making their way upstream to Worcester. So without further ado, we're going to start our walk now. Heads down between a couple of the pubs. I think one of them's called The Plough, down a cobbledy street to make our way down to Upperham. So as you look at a map, we're going down the left-hand side of the river now. That's The Plough there. And I've mentioned these before, these like glass panels here form part of Upton-upon-Severn's flood defence scheme. They were quite controversial at the time, but I think they fit in really well. And being clear, you don't obstruct anything of the view at all, which is really good because that's a brilliant place to look down the river. In terms of logistics today, remember last time I said about Upton and its poor bus service. What I've done today, I've caught the train to Worcester. I caught an early train to get in the city early. And I had an hour spare in Worcester this morning before I waited for the bus, which left the Crown Gate bus station at 9 o'clock to bring me here, Upton, for 9:45. So that's how I've arrived here today. Going back, basically I'm walking to Tewkesbury. Tewkesbury has a railway station, well, within a mile it does, at a place called Ashchurch, and I'll be able to catch a train from there back to where I live in Gloucestershire. So it's fairly straightforward today, but it would be a little bit easier if there was more buses, and I'm really surprised there isn't a direct bus between Upton-upon-Severn and Tewkesbury too, which is only a few miles to the south of here, as we'll see. We've got this wonderful boat here. Just going to check this out before we continue our journey. So we have this terrific boat here, which it looks like it is now used for dining, although I can't actually see the name of it. If anybody watching this lives locally, do you know the name of the boat here? Not sure how often it's used for dining either, but yeah, it's wonderful to see that. Sat right on Sabrina on the banks here at Upton-upon-Severn. So just within a 2-minute walk from where I did that piece to camera, the introductions, standing underneath the 1940 bridge there, you're in quiet. You've got houses here, some large riverside houses, but we're almost already coming away from the urban area of Upton. Oh, incidentally, there was an interpretive board there. I forgot to take a photograph of it, but it did mention that there was a former swing bridge, and I think it was a swing bridge that was replaced in 1940. I think it was damaged during some floods, and there was a previous bridge to that which was also damaged and replaced in the middle of the 19th century. And through the bridge underneath there is Upton's Marina, an important part of the Upton story as well, because as I said, the commercial traffic has declined hardly any, apart from the odd boat delivering gravel. But you turn right as you're coming up from Tewkesbury, and you have Upton Marina there with all its facilities, of course, refueling and tip out and everything that, and obviously a lot of the boats that aren't just using it for winter time would shelter up there, Upton-on-Severn, if they've made their way down from Starrport, where we were a few episodes ago. Oh, just to let you know, if you're watching this, probably sometime after I'm filming it, we're in the middle of August 2023, and the weather conditions today, well, we've had a very mixed summer, really. I'm not a fan of August because the weather tends to be bad. Over the past 15 years, rainfall in August tends to be very high. It can also be quite warm, although this summer's been a lot cooler than last summer, 2022, but we've had some significant days of rain. But today it's dry and it's fairly humid, but I think the weather should be okay. It's not too windy, just a little bit of a breeze to the wind. So we're now on Upperham, and according to the sign there telling me apart from the fact we're entering a triple SI, site of special scientific interest. This is also known as a lammas meadow, and I've not come across that term before. A lammas meadow basically means it's suitable for grazing, or is used for grazing, or perhaps was used for grazing during Lammas Day, which is in August. I don't know the date of that, I'll put that in below. From that date in August right through until the early part of the following year, so it's quite specific that. So this is a lammas meadow, and there it is. You can see from this angle that the newer houses are built on slightly higher ground away from this floodplain here on the banks of the River Severn. Get a lovely aspect of Upton-upon-Severn from this direction. You can see both church towers. The one on the right is the Pepper Pot, and that's all that remains of a previous church there that was completely flooded. And the one on the left is the current one, which is in Cotswold stone, although Upton sits in the Vale, it isn't that far from the Cotswolds. And as a backdrop to that, you've got the Malvern Hills. That's really good there to see the red sandstone gravel being loaded from, or rather unloaded from, the barges on the River Severn onto the mainland, I was going to say, you know, the land, the bit that isn't the water. But yeah, so it's good to see that the River Severn is still has a commercial, practical use, as well as plying lots of leisure craft, which is good, of course, for people's mental health and physical health and well-being as well. But yeah, so that's the first time I've seen that there, because you can't really, well, you can't drive past it because you can only see it from this section of the Severn Way, which I've never walked before. So yeah, it's really good to see that. But we're continuing along now. We're still walking alongside Abraham. Our rifle range, by the way, is so somewhere over the other side of those trees there. I did see the outline of an old brick wall which is kind of overgrown. I'm not going to trudge all over the meadow there just to get to that, but you get the general idea of what that was used for. But we do have something interesting coming up, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. So we now reached the point where an old railway line crossed the River Severn, and that was the line between Ashchurch to Malvern. Well, Little Malvern to be precise, where it joined up with the existing line between Worcester, Malvern and Hereford. And it had a station at Upton. In fact, the section between Upton and Malvern, if I remember correctly, closed first in the 1950s, and then the other section closed between Upton and Ashchurch in the 1960s. I think that was one of Beeching's cuts, but I'll put the exact years for those in below. In fact, it's to Ashchurch that I need to walk to today, because that's where the present day railway station is for the town of Tewkesbury. It's about a mile, just over a mile and a quarter out of the town, but there is still a railway station. It closed, in fact. The whole railway station closed again in the 1960s, and it reopened, I believe, early part of the 1990s, but it's only a very basic station now, and unfortunately there is a military railway near there as well to serve the large MOD base at Ashchurch, where they store things like tanks and Land Rovers. Now I do need to go on a bit of a diversion ahead of me, because there are a group of cows. Is it group, bunch? I can never remember. Herd, whatever. There's a large number of them, so I need to skirt around there, right on the banks of the River Severn. Looks like, almost like they're about to get in. If you remember, cast your mind back to my Shrewsbury video, we actually had cows in the River Severn there, just on a bit where it was low water and the river was very wide. You wouldn't want cows in here because this section of the River Severn here, it's narrower than it was back at Shrewsbury, but it's also much deeper. Because we have a bend here in the river, get a nice shot of the river heading south, but you might be able to make out some traffic on a bridge. Well, which bridge would that be? I'll tell you some more. I'm just going through this section here, which has recently been cut. Now, one of my subscribers by the name of Liz is also walking sections of the Severn Way, been posting some brilliant photographs of her adventures. I think she's got down to Wainlow, which is just north of Gloucester, but I think it was about a month ago, maybe slightly less, she walked this section and it was covered in nettles. Well, as you can see, recently it looks like it's been trimmed back, so thank you, Liz, for reporting that to the Worcestershire County Council, the Footpaths Division. So they've obviously taken notice of what you said, so that's been done now, which is great. So thanks very much for that. And I'm sorry you had a bad experience walking along it, and but hopefully it'll now be better for other walkers making their way from Upton to Tewkesbury. How the devil are you? My name's John and welcome to another edition of Secrets of the Motorway.
Who are you? I'm West
What do you
Country
mean?
Wanderings doing the Severn Way.
West
What's
Country
this about
what?
a motorway?
What are you talking about?
M50
No,
what?
I'm here to do...
What?
This is the M50,
What
mate.
are you talking
River
about?
Severn
You're
here.
crashing in
I'm
on
here to do
somebody
the-
else's video, mate.
Welcome to Secrets of the Motorway M50. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. If you didn't know what on earth that was about, there is another YouTube channel a lot bigger than mine called Auto Shenanigans, and he goes to this fossil mode of transport, roads, but he's very, very good at it. He's very, very good at explaining lots of features of different motorways. I think a few months ago he came here to look at the M50. Just tell you a little bit about the M50. It's one of the earliest motorways in the United Kingdom. I think the first one was in Preston, wasn't it, in Lancashire, Preston bypass, up somewhere up there in the north anyway. But this one here was built towards the end of the 1950s. It was actually built before the M5. Now, for a long time, this just connected up to the A38 at Strensham interchange. And later on, they slowly started to build the M5 south from Birmingham, and eventually in 1977 it connected up to the Devon city of Exeter. It took them I think it was about 15 years to complete overall. But before any of that, this was here on its own. But why would you build a motorway here just going across the Severn Vale? Well, it was all part of an integral plan, of course, and this was built to take traffic to and from the West Midlands, to and from South Wales. So it goes in a kind of a northeast southwest direction. It joins up with the A40 and then becomes I think it's the 449, joining up with the M4 near the city of Newport, and then it's connecting up to the South Wales motorway network, and it joins the M5 just a couple of miles to the west of here at Strensham interchange. And so for a long time that was the most southerly point of the M5 until they extended it right down into Gloucestershire, Somerset and Devon. rather lovely Severn Vale church you can see to the right is the one at Bushley, just outside the town of Tewkesbury, but still within Worcestershire. And now we're parallel to the footpath that diverges away on the right towards the village, I think it's probably more hamlet, of Bushley, which does look indeed interesting. Unfortunately, I don't have time to make that diversion today because I want to have some time to explore around the town of Tewkesbury, which I have never featured on West Country Wanderings before. Going to put that right in a bit. Because it's so flat here, you get a real sense of the sky. The sky seems to dominate because there's less hills. The hills are only in the far distance there of the Cotswold Hills. We have something interesting coming up which reminds me of my childhood. Let's go and have a closer look. Yes, it's this here on the left-hand side of the screen. It's a wind pump. But why does it remind me of my childhood? Now this wind pump here, standing by the banks of the River Severn, looking all forlorn and rusty, reminds me of my childhood. My grandmother used to live in the village of Cambridge in Gloucestershire, not far from the town of Dursley, right on the A38. And we used to go down to see her every Friday evening. When we did, driving down the A38, you could see 2 or 3 of these wind pumps in the fields alongside the River Severn. They've now gone, but it's good to see this one here, still here, reminding me of those Friday evenings driving down the A38 to see my grandmother. But aren't they just wonderful? Up ahead is Mythe Bridge, and we'll be going over that shortly, and when we do we'll be leaving, saying goodbye to Worcestershire and arriving in Gloucestershire. We'll be in Gloucestershire for the next couple of episodes here on the Severn Way until we enter South Gloucestershire. So here I am on Mythe Bridge, right in the middle of the River Severn. So I've got one foot, my front foot's in Worcestershire, my back foot is now in Gloucestershire. Welcome to Gloucestershire. It's been a privilege to be able to walk through on the Severn Way in Worcestershire, but now we're going to continue south. But before we do that, we're going to have a look around the town. So why not join me here? So we're now looking at a cross in an old flour mill that was built in the earlier part of the 19th century, with a rather magnificent bridge next to it. There's lots of things to show you here. First of all, if you remember earlier in the video I said about a railway, well, there's another bridge of it actually going over part of the River Avon. In fact, what's known as the Old Avon, the non-navigable bit. And we're now looking down the navigable section of the River Avon here in Tewkesbury. Tewkesbury is essentially boat central, as you can see from the marina here. I've crossed over the road and entered Marina's car park. And there's a closer look at that very picturesque weir. So I'm refreshed now. I've just stopped at this pub here, sat in their garden overlooking the river. This is the Black Bear, and it's reputed to be Gloucestershire's oldest inn, 13-something and 100. Also, Dick Turpin was reputed to have stayed here as well, but I know that lots of pubs can claim to that, but there is reason to believe that it could well be genuine. But yes, very attractive pub. It looks like it has been recently restored, and it sits right at the far end of the High Street, between the High Street and the River Avon. Apologies for the usual traffic noise and shouts and screams and all that kind of thing, bang crash all up, because we're in an urban area. We're in the High Street of Tewkesbury. Just going to go to the other end of the High Street to film a little bit around the Abbey, and I will finish there as well. I'll do a piece to camera at the very end showing you that. But before we do any of that though, we're going to make a detour off down one of the alleyways which takes us to a couple of mills. In fact, Tewkesbury is famous for flour mills. One of them was called Brough Mill. I think that's how you pronounce it. It looks like borough, but I think it was pronounced Brough Mill. And they were important to provide a source of employment for this larger area, rural area here on the Gloucestershire and Worcestershire borders. But yeah, so that's key. Also, there's a number of medieval buildings in Tewkesbury, so perhaps we have a look at that as well. So this is the Tudor House Hotel, complete with its own secret garden, and to access that you need to go through the main entrance of the hotel here in Tewkesbury. It's quite busy today, obviously, because we're in high summer as well, and it attracts a lot of boater people that come in on the boats up and down, well, down from the Starport, where we've traced our steps along the Severn Way, and also down from Stratford-upon-Avon on the navigable River Avon, which has its own trust. It's not actually looked after by the Canals and Rivers Trust. It's the Avon Navigation Trust, which was set up in 1950. So if you do pay like a membership fee for the Canals and River Trusts to enable you to be a continuous cruiser, you still need to pay a fee to come onto the river. And that's the back of the Tudor House Hotel, which is indeed a Tudor building. I don't know the year of it. This is the famous Brough flour mills, no longer used as flour mills. In fact, a lot of it I do believe is derelict, but it is indeed a listed building. A picturesque stretch of the River Avon here in Tewkesbury takes you on down to King John's Bridge. It's a very attractive bridge. It's what we saw earlier in the video from a distance from when I was standing on King John Bridge, but isn't that fantastic? And it leads into the flour mills. Here with the finger post for the Severn Way is the dereliction of once was a magnificent and very fine, and I think possibly the biggest flour mills in the United Kingdom. And it's looking like a busy time on both sections of the River Avon there. I'm not sure what's going on there on the old Avon. Has that bridge just come through, or that large river cruiser just come through? Sure if that narrowboat is turning around there. It's rather interesting, isn't it? And down in that direction of the River Avon we have Tewkesbury Abbey, of course. In case at this point you were confused as whether this was the Avon on the River Severn, back of Avon, just to ensure there's no room for doubt. And strangely, the house on the opposite side of the river here is actually called Two Back of Avon. And when we return on the Severn Way next time, we'll be heading across this bridge over the River Avon to rejoin up with the Severn, heading south to the city of Gloucester. They're probably thinking, why was the mill industry, particularly flour mills, so important? Why did it thrive here in the town of Tewkesbury? Well, of course, the answer to that lies in the source of water power to drive the mills, because you've got not just one river in the River Severn, but two with the Avon. And because of all that force coming down and joining here at Tewkesbury and heading down into the Bristol Channel, that provided water power to drive the mills and to grind the flour. Tewkesbury is full of these little alleyways. To my right here is the Cross House Tavern. This is actually called Guest Lane, presumably because that was an inn, or Tolsey Lane, and Tolsey House lies at the end of the alleyway, a magnificent Tudor building, but there was people outside, so unfortunately I couldn't film that. Here's a central cross in Tewkesbury. It's where there's a division road, so the road we came on over was the Ledbury Road from the Mythe Bridge. Road then diverges over towards the A46, where it joins the M5 and heads into the heart of the Cotswolds around places like Chipping Campden and Broadway. I'll be heading that way shortly, about a mile's walk to the railway station at Ashchurch after I've finished here. I'm walking now along the high street towards Tewkesbury Abbey, just looking at all of these magnificent Tudor buildings along here, which is fantastic to see. So this is the bell behind me. The reason that has a significance to my family is because my paternal grandmother used to work here. Originally she worked in Wolverhampton. She was based up in Wolverhampton, and she was what was known as being in service. And she came down here. Basically, she was chambermaid working in that hotel, which was then a very prestigious hotel in Tewkesbury. Tewkesbury, because it's on the A38, a major route heading down from the north through the Midlands and into the West Country. It was an important coaching point, and that's why it's served by a number of inns. But yes, the Bell Inn with family connection there, here in Tewkesbury. Now, before we head over across the road to Tewkesbury Abbey to close today's video off, there is a little courtyard down here. I just want to show you that. Can't give you the entire history of this town, because there is so much to see here in Tewkesbury. It is an amazing place. There is also the John Moore Museum on the opposite side of the road there, so you have that, and we have the famous Abbey Antiques, which has just been on the BBC Antiques programme the other day, I believe, with Robert, the guy that played Jesus of Nazareth. He was on it. Oh, it's gone dark. Robert Powell, that's who I was looking for, so I had to adjust the shutter speed and everything then, because it's so much darker in this alleyway. But at the end of this alleyway we have the old Baptist chapel, which I think serves as an interesting counterpoint to the magnificent abbey just across the road, equally beautiful and historic in their own way. So there it is, the old Baptist chapel. And yeah, it does say if you want to see in it, you can contact the John Moore Museum on the opposite side of the road. And I think probably we will return to Tewkesbury at a future point to have a more detailed look around this wonderful town here in Gloucestershire. So we're now in the grounds of Tewkesbury Abbey, and we'll come back here again when we start Severn Way 20, when we head to the city of Gloucester next time, which is actually going to be quite a long walk. It's been a shorter one today, as I say. I got here about 1:30. I was able to show you around some of the town. We've got 13.5 miles to walk to the city of Gloucester next time. And because of that, I will show you inside Tewkesbury Abbey next time, but then we'll make our way straight down towards Gloucester. There is a really interesting thing en route. In fact, there's two things in terms of churches. As well as seeing the Abbey here next time, we'll also be able to look at Odders Chapel and the church at Deerhurst, which are next to each other, but both absolutely stunning. So I hope you can join me for that. In addition to that, we've got the city of Gloucester, but like Worcester, what I'm going to do a 20A video on Gloucester, because there's so much to tell you about Gloucester in terms of connections to Sabrina and the history that are intertwined between the river and the city, being a Roman city, of course. So that'll be coming up as a separate video after we've arrived in Gloucester. I hope you've enjoyed this section of the Severn Way from the lovely Worcestershire town of Upton-upon-Severn to the equally lovely Gloucestershire town of Tewkesbury, where we've met the River Avon here as well. And I've told you a little bit about a couple of family connections as well, haven't I, en route. Hope you enjoyed that. Close now with a little bit of photography around the town of Tewkesbury before I go and get my train. See you all soon. Take care of yourselves, look after yourselves. I hope to see you on West Country Wanderings again very soon. All the best. Bye-bye.